This is a power station that you can pull like a suitcase, and it fits in my category 3 of the way I like to organize power stations. This is the new Growatt Helios 3600 that they sent me to test out. So if you're looking to pick up a battery backup this Black Friday season, this may be one to consider. But first, let me talk about the 4 categories so you know what context the number 3 fits in. So right here are my examples of category number 1. This is what I would call small and portable. They're best for things like charging phones, laptops, taking camping, or even with the AC ports, running a TV at a tailgate, or even use the 12-volt port for running a portable cooler. But in general, these are not powerful enough to run your full-size refrigerator if there was a power outage, or even something like a typical coffee maker. So here's an example of the next category. The key distinctive here is that all of these power stations can run your full-size refrigerator and your coffee maker. They're generally still pretty portable at 25 to 50 pounds. And in terms of capacity, they're generally 1 to 2 kilowatt hours in range. So if someone has no idea what kind of power station to get, but they want something that can back up things like the refrigerator at home if there's an outage, then I suggest getting something in category 2. Here's an example of what category 3 looks like. Way too big to put on my desk. The key distinctive is that these can run basically anything you can plug into an outlet in your house. They also tend to offer RV outlets, the 30 amp kind. And since they're bigger, their runtime is much longer. They also tend to have the ability to add an expansion battery or 2. I put the weight of these in about 50-100 pound range. So it's somewhat portable, but you probably don't want to be moving them around very much. Category 4 units are even bigger, and though you could use them as a portable unit, I'd say they're mainly used as whole home backup solutions, and you don't really want to move them around a lot since they tend to be over 100 pounds. So those are my 4 categories, and as I mentioned, the Helios 3600 is in category 3, so you can wheel it around like a suitcase, but it's big enough to power most things in your house or your RV. So for example, I simulated a power outage and ran a test with it on our refrigerator for our family of 7 while we were using it, and the battery ran the fridge nonstop without any input for 30 hours and 28 minutes. The Helios 3600 has a great price point, some solid features, a very surprising solar input, and some design choices that are a little odd. Let's start with a brief tour of the unit and talk about how it works to use it with inputs and outputs. It's got 4 AC outlets that can output 3600 watts of continuous output, a 30 amp RV port. It's got a 12 volt car port, some barrel ports. It has Anderson ports. These are 12 volt outputs up to about 400 watts or so of output, and then you have all these USB-C ports. And down here they have a 240 volt outlet, which I was very excited at first to see, but then in practice, this is a NEMA 620. It's kind of an odd shaped plug. It doesn't have a neutral, just 2 hots and a ground. So let me know what you would plan to use this for if you had a battery unit. I'm guessing that they have this on here for people with well pumps. Something that's a bit odd is the maximum output power on this 240 volt port is 2200 watts, while the 120 volt port's maximum is 3600 watts. You would expect the higher voltage to have a higher power output, but it doesn't. I believe the reason for this is because Growatt is using circuitry to step up the voltage from 120 to 240, and there's a current limitation of about 9 amps in that circuitry. And you can't use the 120 and the 240 at the same time, so as soon as I click that button, it shuts this one off. This just fits inside my category 3 at 99 pounds. It has a capacity of about 3.7 kilowatt hours, and the batteries inside are lithium iron phosphate, which is the technology most everyone is using. They're the long-lasting kind and are rated for 4,000 cycles. And a cycle is going from 100% down to 0% and then back to 100%. So a very long-lasting chemistry. My favorite way to charge these power stations is with solar, and when I first got this one, I was disappointed because the manual says its maximum solar input is 60 volts with a 2000 watt power input, and all that through one XT60 port. So that means lots of paralleling panels and a high current. But when I asked Growatt about this, they told me the circuitry was actually designed to accept up to 150 volts. So I gave it a try and connected 4 solar panels in series, and this is about 140 volts, because when you put solar panels in series, you add up the voltage, and it worked. If the limit was 60 volts, I would have fried the charging circuitry, but instead the unit was happily making about 1200 watts. This 150 volt limit makes getting to 2000 watts easier because, for example, you could get 6 rigid solar panels, put 3 in series, and then parallel the other set of 3. I have my guesses, but I'm not sure why they list it at 60 volts, but it's actually able to handle more. Let me know what you think. This is the kind of unit that can use multiple inputs at the same time if you want the fastest speed to charge. They have wall AC, solar, and Anderson inputs. The Anderson port is intended for you to connect directly to your vehicle's alternator for charging, but note the input maximum is limited to 400 watts. And And it's hard to see in this example, but all three input icons are on the screen, and if I had them maxed out, I could charge at the fastest rate of 3600 watts, which might take about an hour and a half to charge from 0%. And if you were using the normal wall AC by itself, it would take about 3 hours. You can add extra batteries to the system, and they have the same suitcase-like rolling feature with a storage compartment on top. Each extra battery has the same capacity of about 3.7 kilowatt hours, and they plug in on the side. The cable though is pretty short, so if you're planning to connect the maximum of 4 extra batteries, you have to do it like this or face some the other way. I really wish they had a more elegant solution than this. When I first saw the extra batteries, I was excited because it has DC outputs on the front that you could use independent of the main unit, and on the side it has an XT60 charging port. I thought you could charge it independently with solar panels, but unfortunately, unless you have a 58.4 volt charger to put in here, this port is basically useless. But you could charge it with the main unit and still use it independently. For example, with the 12 volt port, I ran a portable fridge for several days. But without independent charging, I just don't know how useful this is. I tested the Helios's AC output on my RV. I used the RV port with an adapter, and I was able to run continuous power near its maximum output of about 3600 watts. I was also able to run it beyond that at about 4000 watts for about 30 seconds or so before I turned off a microwave. And to get to that output number, I ran one of the rooftop air conditioners, a microwave, I was charging a power station at 500 watts, and I used a space heater all at the same time. The Helios 3600 was able to start one of my rooftop air conditioners, but the surge power needed wasn't enough to start both of them. I would imagine if I installed soft start devices, it would work because of the lower surge power needed to start the compressors. A feature I haven't been able to test because we've had a warm fall is the internal heating. It doesn't seem to have self-heating where it uses the internal battery to warm it up if it gets too cold to use. But if the internal temperature gets below 4 degrees down to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, if you have wall AC or solar connected, it will use that to warm up the batteries. Another feature worth mentioning is that this has a UPS-like feature, so if you have it plugged into the wall, it's getting grid power, and you're using the AC outlets. If you were to lose grid power, how fast will it switch over to providing power to these AC outlets here in the front? It's supposed to do that within 20 milliseconds, so to test it out, I have a laptop here. This laptop does not have a battery in it. It's running completely from the wall brick here, the AC plug. So let's simulate a power outage. Keep your eye on the screen here. There was no flicker or anything of backlight. The computer is still running. So it switched over from grid power to battery power that quickly. So this guy comes with a smartphone app that you can use to monitor and control it via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I'm in airplane mode right now, talking to it over Bluetooth. You can turn on and off various functions. So like I just turned on the AC outlets, so right there. And if you go in the settings menu, there's all kinds of things that you can change, like how fast it's going to recharge from wall AC, all these different things. And my favorite thing about these smartphone apps is that you can do a firmware upgrade with a touch of a button. Since I'm not on the internet, it's not able to check. But if you see here, you can see all these Chinese characters. There's little funny things like that in the app. Growatt says they are putting out a new version. I don't know when that's going to happen. But so far, the functionality of the app itself seems to work okay. That is with the exception of the power strategy section. It's meant for things like setting time of use rates or solar only input. That unfortunately did not work for me. One thing you can't do with the app is communicate with the extra batteries. They don't have a wireless module in them, so you can't change things like timeout settings or turn outputs on or off, but when it is connected to the main unit, you can see some basic information. I ran an AC efficiency test to see how much usable capacity you can get, and with a 1600 watt consistent load on the AC ports, it scored pretty well at 88%. Some other things I haven't mentioned is that it has a physical button on the side to quickly drop the input under 500 watts to enable quiet charging. It comes with a 5-year warranty, and if you want true 240 volt split phase power, you can get 2 main units and a connector to join them together. Make sure to check the video description down below for latest prices and let me know if you have any questions or comments.